One night near the dense forests of Hood River County, Oregon, a pickup truck stops outside the Blue Angel Motel. Inside, R.C. lights a cigarette and glances at his date, a woman he met earlier that evening. After some flirtation, she leans in, compliments his kiss, and he blushes, asking if she still wants to rent a room. She smiles, suggesting they relax in the truck a bit longer. R.C. reaches into the back for some drinks from the cooler, where he keeps a gun tucked under the seat, unbeknownst to her. After a few sips, R.C. asks if she'd like to exchange numbers instead of getting a room. She playfully mentions that people usually connect through Instagram nowadays, teasing him about being out of touch. He laughs, admitting he may be a bit old-fashioned, which she finds endearing. Then she confesses she's never spent the night with someone she just met, though she doesn't rule it out. She adds that if it happens, it's because she really wants it. R.C. then reveals he's in a relationship, but says it's not too serious. She reassures him, saying she wouldn't have flirted with him at the bar if she had an issue with it, emphasizing that this encounter is purely for fun. Relieved, R.C. grabs a bottle of liquor from the glove compartment, and they share a drink. She then brings up the risks women face when spending time alone with men they don't know well. Many women, she notes, avoid casual encounters out of fear. Surprised, R.C. admits he hadn't considered it from that angle. She says that's typical, as he's not a woman, but assures him she thinks he's trustworthy. Then she half-jokingly asks if he's a serial killer. He laughs nervously, assuring her he's not, and they relax. Their conversation shifts to her interest in intense role-play scenarios. She suggests he tie her up and act out a rough scene, though he's hesitant. She insists he fully commit if they're going to try it, noting she can tell when someone isn't invested. R.C. admits he's acted before, but nothing like this. She playfully proposes a romantic storyline where he's the bad guy, even asking him not to stop if she says no during the act, reassuring him that she's consenting now. Still uncertain, R.C. eventually agrees, stashing his pistol in his ankle holster as they prepare. They settle on Mr. Snuffleupagus as a safe word. Later in the motel room, R.C. cautiously follows her instructions, binding her wrists with leather cuffs to the headboard. She urges him to go harder, but when she tells him to stop, he's uncomfortable and pulls back, aware that it's only a role play. She sighs, frustrated, and asks him to release her. She wonders aloud if the experience feels wrong because it's with him, but he jokes it might be for the best as they're just getting to know each other. They continue talking, and she teases him about wanting a relationship beyond that night. Claiming she isn't on social media, she leans into her air of mystery, which only makes him want her number more. They share another kiss, but when he grabs a condom, she stops him, saying he's too eager. Exasperated, he decides to cuff her hands again, despite her telling him not to. She clarifies that just because she asked for restraint once doesn't mean he can repeat it without permission. R.C., however, takes control, slapping her as part of the act. She quickly says the safe word, Mr. Snuffleupagus, prompting him to stop immediately. He releases her, apologizing for taking things too far, thinking it was what she wanted. Unexpectedly, she laughs, complimenting his performance. Confused, he asks why she used the safe word if she was enjoying it, and she explains she just needed a moment to pause. As they kiss again, she momentarily imagines him as something sinister, staring at him with a mix of fear and distrust. Sensing her shift, he asks if she's okay. She dismisses it, calling him handsome, and to break the tension, takes out a bavy with some substances, suggesting they both unwind. Initially, R.C. hesitates, mentioning it's almost morning and that he hasn't used in a long time. But when the woman reminds him it's her birthday and says the substance excites her for intimacy, he gives in. She sets up 2 lines of powder on a hand mirror, carefully sprinkling a second, similar-looking powder beside the first. After they each take a line, they start kissing again. Moments later, though, she abruptly pulls away and starts putting on her shoes, leaving R.C. confused. When he asks if they're going to follow through with their plans, she teases him, saying they will, if he still has the energy in 5 minutes. Frustrated, he starts dressing and tells her to find her own way home. Seeing he's serious, she grabs her bag and locks herself in the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, she opens her backpack, taking out a pocket knife and a taser. But when she returns, she finds the motel door open and R.C. nowhere to be seen. Stepping outside, she spots him disoriented and struggling to crawl away. Calmly, she grabs him by the legs and drags him back into the room. Laying him on the bed, R.C. weakly asks why she isn't affected by the powder. Smiling, she holds up the vial and reveals that she slipped him a sedative. She lies down beside him, claiming she hadn't planned for things to go this way. She just wanted some fun. Turning on the radio, she starts singing along, and then she takes off his boot, stuffs his sock into his mouth, and pulls out her pocket knife, using it to carve into his chest. After this brutal act, she goes back to the bathroom to clean her hands with a washcloth, removing a red wig to reveal her natural blonde hair beneath. She tosses RC's phone in the toilet, and while rifling through his wallet, she discovers he's a police officer. Returning to the bedroom, she straddles him, wiping the blood to reveal she's carved the letters E and L into his skin. She hints that although she's done this to others, RC is her first with initials on the chest. Lifting her knife, ready to finish him off, she's taken by surprise when RC pulls out his hidden pistol and fires, shooting off part of her ear. Terrified, she flees the room, jumps off the balcony, and dashes to the motel's front desk, begging for help. Meanwhile, RC drags himself to the corner table, snorting the remaining powder in a desperate attempt to counter the sedative's effects. At the front desk, the woman frantically tells the clerk, Libby, to lock the door. When Libby asks if they have any weapons, she responds that they only have a baseball bat. Libby instructs another guest, Tanya, to call the police, but the woman quickly stabs Libby in the neck, killing her. Shocked, Tanya watches in horror as the woman apologizes, saying she didn't want to but had no choice, and then demands Tanya hand over her car keys, nursing scrubs, and medical supplies. As the woman speeds away from the motel, RC chases her in his truck, struggling to stay alert by snorting the rest of the powder he has left. Along a deserted road, he stops, climbs onto the truck bed, and fires at her vehicle. In a panic, she loses control, swerves, and crashes. She stumbles out of the car, only to see RC trying to run her over. She barely evades him by dashing into the forest, searching for a hiding spot. Deeper in the woods, she finds an abandoned bottle of liquor and cigarettes left by campers. After removing her ear bandage, she disinfects the wound with the alcohol, then lights a cigarette to calm herself before moving on. Meanwhile, nearby, a couple named Genevieve and Frederick enjoy a quiet morning together over coffee. After breakfast, they sit by the window, working on a puzzle, when they spot the woman banging frantically on their front door. Back in the woods, RC discovers her discarded liquor bottle and bloody bandage, realizing he's closing in on her trail. At the house, Frederick cautiously opens the door while Genevieve holds a can of bear spray. Exhausted, the woman pleads for help and collapses into their arms. As they patch up her injury, she shares a brief account of her ordeal, then asks if they have any weapons. Genevieve replies that they only have bear spray. Wanting to help more, Genevieve heads to the upstairs bathroom to get pain medication. Left alone with Frederick, the woman, famished, asks to eat their leftovers, which he agrees to. As she eats, he mentions he's going to call the police. Panicking, she begs him not to, but he insists it's the right thing to do. Just as Genevieve returns with the medication, she finds her husband on the floor, beaten and bleeding with a knife in his chest. The woman stands over him, holding the phone, implying she used it to strike him when he tried to call for help. As Frederick falls lifeless to the ground, she assures Genevieve she didn't want to kill him but had no choice. She promises Genevieve that she'll spare her if she cooperates. The woman asks if there's a secure room where she can lock Genevieve away. Still in shock, Genevieve mentions they have a storm shelter outside, stocked with supplies for emergencies. She explains she can secure it with a chain from the inside, and the woman agrees. After leading her to the shelter, Genevieve makes a break for it across the property. The woman prepares to chase her, but suddenly spots RC approaching through the trees and retreats into the house instead. In the kitchen, she tosses the freezer's contents outside, unplugs it, downs the pain medication from Genevieve's bottle, puts on a leather jacket hanging on the wall, grabs the bear spray, hides in the freezer, listening carefully as RC enters the house. RC cautiously searches room by room, finding Frederick's lifeless body in the kitchen. Outside, he notices the scattered frozen meat, which leads him back to the freezer. Sensing her inside, he shoots the freezer, injuring her arm. Her scream gives her away, and he opens the lid, knocking her out with a punch. Moments later, RC cuffs her to the freezer and calls his fellow officer Pete for backup. As she regains consciousness, he realizes she's the Electric Lady, a serial killer who has eluded capture for months. He deduces her identity after discovering Frederick's body and recognizing her signature carved initials on his own chest. Resigned, she admits she always thought she'd end up like Gary Gilmore, a notorious killer who famously requested execution by firing squad. The woman, in a last-ditch confession, admits she felt a fleeting connection to RC while he was choking her the previous night, a warped feeling of intimacy in the midst of violence. But before he can react, she blinds him with bear spray, and in the ensuing struggle, she sinks her teeth into his neck, tearing into an artery. As R.C. collapses to the floor, bleeding out, she pulls herself out of the freezer, grabs his concealed pistol, and hides it in her jacket. As she hears approaching sirens, she quickly stages the scene, pulling down her pants. When officers Pete and Gail arrive, she tearfully claims that R.C., intoxicated, had abducted her with the intent to harm her. Pete insists they wait for the investigators and medics, but Gail argues that the woman needs immediate medical attention. The officers finally agree to take her to the nearest hospital after she fakes a seizure on the floor. On the way to town, they come across Genevieve, who tries to flag them down for help. But before Genevieve can explain what happened, the woman pulls out the pistol from the back seat and shoots her, shocking the officers. Demanding their weapons, she forces Gail out of the vehicle, keeping Pete at gunpoint and instructing him to keep driving. Soon, they stop on a deserted stretch of road where Pete, in a last attempt to understand her, asks why she kills. She admits tearfully that sometimes in her mind, people look like devils rather than humans. This twisted vision drove her to attack R.C. in the motel, seeing him as a demon. Noticing Pete's reflection in the rearview mirror, she sees the same haunting vision and shoots him dead. She exits the vehicle, walking further down the empty road until she flags down a passing pickup truck. The concerned driver offers her a lift, but when she catches her reflection in the side mirror, she's stunned, her face twisting from shock to acceptance. As she reaches for her pistol, the driver notices and fires first, fatally wounding her. With her last breaths, she hears the driver calling the police, explaining it was self-defense and that she's rushing to the nearest hospital. As they drive, she watches the driver in silence until she fades away.